Well, Aaliyah, welcome to the ownership club, Marcus grunted, pushing the last, heaviest box of books into the spacious foyer and wiping the sweat from his brow. Let's break tradition, though. The first thing to enter our home won't be a cat, but the dog. Come on, Rex. The large German shepherd obediently stepped over the threshold. Allie smiled, but her smile was tired, barely touching her lips. The move had completely drained her. She looked around the entryway, taking in the high ceilings, slightly aged, but graced with intricate crown molding, the wide oak doors, and the faintly gleaming hardwood floor. Welcome to Barbara's Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. Mark, it's amazing, Allie whispered, running her hand over the cool wall covered in old wallpaper with a faded floral pattern. It feels so authentic. You bet, her husband replied with pride. Art Deco style, all the trimmings. Grant, my partner, settled all the paperwork in no time flat. He said we got incredibly lucky. This much square footage right downtown. People fight for condos like this, and it was handed to us on a silver platter. So, thanks to Aunt Carol. He walked over to Allie and wrapped his arms around her shoulders. His embrace, once a comforting cocoon for her, had lately started to feel more like a cage. Allie herself felt that the loss of their baby during childbirth was to blame. Doctors had fought desperately to save both mother and child, but only she had been fortunate, if one could even call it luck. At that moment, Rex, who had been curiously sniffing the corners, suddenly froze in the middle of the foyer. He stood stock still over one of the squares of old floor tile. The fur on the back of his neck slowly rose. He lowered his head, sniffed the tile, and then let out a low, guttural growl that sent a chill down Allie's spine. "Rex, what's wrong?" she called. The dog didn't react. He growled again, louder this time, and then erupted in a series of short, furious barks, staring at the tile as if a deadly enemy were lurking there. The dog took a step back, then another, refusing to even approach the spot. "Mark, look what he's doing!" Allie said, alarm creeping into her voice. Marcus walked over and lazily nudged the tile with the toe of his boot. It gave a hollow sound. "What could possibly be wrong with him? He probably smells rodents," Marcus shrugged. "The building is old. Maybe mice have nested somewhere? Don't worry about it. Rex, knock it off. Come." But the dog didn't obey. He continued to bark, his eyes fixed on the cursed square on the floor, and he took a wide detour to get around it and move into the next room. "That's odd, Mark," Allie mumbled, looking at the ruffled, nervous dog. "It's nothing," Marcus dismissed. "He'll get used to it. Come on, I want to show you the view from the bedroom. It's breathtaking." Allie followed him, but the feeling of unease lingered. Something about this apartment wasn't right, and Rex had sensed it first. The situation hadn't changed by the end of the day. The dog stubbornly refused to step on the tile. Every hour, the ritual repeated itself. Rex would stop, growl, bark, and the fur on his scruff would stand on end. Mark merely chuckled. Allie, however, started to feel genuinely scared. The last straw came when the dog started eating less and whining in his sleep. "I can't watch this anymore. I'm taking him to the vet," Allie stated firmly at breakfast. "Don't be ridiculous," her husband replied irritably, his eyes glued to his smartphone. "A vet. It's just the stress of moving. It'll pass." "No, it won't pass. He's suffering. Can't you see? He's never acted like this." "Fine. Do what you want." Marcus looked up at her, and a cold detachment flashed in his eyes, as if her worries were minor, annoying obstacles in his big, important world. Marcus started staying late at work often, citing important negotiations with Grant. His phone was password protected, and when he took calls, he would go into the next room or onto the balcony, lowering his voice to a whisper. Allie tried to push away the terrifying suspicions, blaming his exhaustion and concern for her, but a worm of doubt gnawed at her from the inside. The veterinary clinic was small, but clean and bright. They were seen by a young doctor whose name tag read Dr. Julian Vance. He had kind, attentive eyes and calm, confident movements. Rex, who had been anxious the entire car ride, suddenly quieted down in his arms, allowing the examination, and even wagged his tail. "So, what's the trouble, handsome?" Julian asked gently, scratching him behind the ear. Allie, anxious, meticulously described the strange behavior, focusing on the tile in the foyer. The doctor listened carefully, never interrupting, occasionally nodding. "All right," he said after finishing the examination. "Let me put your mind at ease right away. Somatically, your dog is perfectly healthy. Heart rate is normal, lungs are clear, reflexes are fine. There are minor signs of stress, likely from the move, but that's to be expected. But the behavior you're describing—" The vet paused for a moment, looking at Rex. "That kind of behavior isn't just fear. It's a reaction to a very powerful, concentrated irritant, most likely a smell. I don't think it's just mice. A dog's sense of smell is thousands of times sharper than ours. He's detecting something that causes intense, extreme anxiety or even a burst of protective instinct, like he's trying to warn you about danger." "And what could that be?" Allie asked softly. "It's hard to say. Chemicals, poisons that might have been spilled once, or—" He hesitated, choosing his words. "The byproducts of very old decay. The smell could have seeped into the wood or concrete beneath the tile and remained for decades. Dogs can detect that." Allie felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. "Are you saying—" "I'm not saying anything specific," Julian gently interrupted her. "I'm just speculating based on practice. In any case, you shouldn't force him. Try to make it easy for the dog to avoid the spot. Maybe lay down a rug and observe him. If other symptoms appear, I'll be here." His professionalism and quiet confidence were calming. For the first time in a long time, Allie felt that her worries weren't being dismissed as feminine hysteria. "Thank you so much, Dr. Vance." "Just Julian," he smiled, and faint lines gathered at the corners of his eyes. "Here is my number. If Rex continues to act strangely or if you have any questions, call any time." Allie noticed the man's gaze linger on her hands, specifically the absence of a wedding ring. She had taken it off after the hospital. It had become too loose, and she never brought herself to put it back on, as if that would mean accepting the new, joyless reality. "Thank you," she said again, feeling a slight flush creep up her cheeks. "He's calm as a cucumber here, though. So the problem is your foyer," Julian concluded. A slight, barely perceptible pause hung in the air, filled with something more than just a conversation between a doctor and a patient's owner. In Julian's eyes was sympathy and genuine interest. In her, gratitude and the sudden feeling that she wasn't alone. Immediately after the vet clinic, Allie left Rex at home and went to her job at the school with a new sense of resolve. The conversation with the doctor seemed to have given her strength. She no longer felt crazy. They simply had a problem, and it needed to be solved. Before her classes, the principal, a good-natured, portly man named Principal Williams, called her in. "Aaliyah Dixon, hello. Have a seat." Principal Williams gestured toward the chair across from his massive desk. "I have some news for you. We're transferring a new student to your 6th grade class." "Okay, do you have the paperwork?" "That's the thing." The principal sighed and took off his glasses. "I have the documents, but I should warn you, the boy is very difficult. He was, let's say, asked to leave an exclusive prep school. His father recently passed away, and his mother is entirely wrapped up in her business. In short, a spoiled, entitled brat, as they say now. His name is Bryce." The principal slid the folder containing the student's file toward her. Allie opened it and quickly scanned the lines. Name, date of birth, address, and the surname, Sinclair. The air suddenly became thick and sticky. It was hard to breathe. Everything swam before her eyes for a moment. Sinclair. Vanessa Sinclair. Allie involuntarily gripped the armrests of the chair. "Aaliyah, are you all right? You look pale," her boss asked worriedly. "Yes, I'm fine. Just a bit of low blood pressure, I suppose." The weather is changing." But the weather had nothing to do with it. That surname, like a poisonous shard from the past, plunged straight into her heart. The art lesson was dedicated to an autumn landscape. The children were absorbed, mixing ochre, carmine, and gold on their palettes, trying to capture the riot of colors outside the window. A creative, slightly buzzing silence, the kind Allie loved, filled the room. The peace was broken by the squeak of the door. A tall 12-year-old, with a trendy haircut and a look of contempt on his face, walked into the classroom without knocking. He was dressed in expensive brand-name clothes that screamed status louder than any voice. "Oh, did I miss the doodle session?" the small boy drawled loudly, scanning the class. It was Bryce. "Hello," Allie said, in a steady, calm voice, though her heart was pounding in her throat. "You must be Bryce. We've already started. Please come in and take a free seat." The boy ignored her. He strolled through the classroom, peering over everyone's shoulders. "Huh, your tree is as crooked as my neighbor's legs," he tossed out to one boy. "And what is yours, a sunset in a toxic dump? Those colors are so sickly," he sniped, poking a finger at a girl's drawing on the front desk. The children flinched. Allie felt a cold rage begin to simmer inside her. "Bryce," she repeated, raising her voice slightly. "Sit down immediately." He finally graced her with his attention, looked her up and down with an assessing gaze, and said, "Or what? You'll give me detention? Oh, I'm so scared." He clutched his hands dramatically to his chest. "My mom will donate so much money for drapes that you'll be giving me A's until graduation." The class froze. It was a direct challenge. Allie slowly walked up to the new student and looked him straight in the eyes, brazen, self-assured, exactly like his mother's. "First," she said quietly, but so that everyone heard, "in my classroom, no one ever insults other people's work. Talent can be expressed in many ways, but effort deserves respect. Second, you can try to scare someone else with your mother's money. And third, if you don't sit down right now and stop disrupting the others, you'll be drawing your autumn landscape in the principal's office, and I will personally make sure that you get every detail right. Are we clear?" There was such icy steel in Allie's voice that Bryce was momentarily taken aback. He was used to adults backing down. The privileged boy opened his mouth to make another snide comment, but meeting her unblinking stare, he changed his mind. He scoffed, loudly dragged a chair out from the back row, and plopped into it, demonstratively crossing one leg over the other. "Whatever you say," Bryce muttered through gritted teeth. The lesson was hopelessly ruined, but Allie had won the first battle. When the bell rang and the children started packing up, a few students approached her. "Miss Dixon, you really put him in his place," the class representative, Maria, said with admiration. "He annoyed everyone at his old school." Allie gave a tired smile. "Thank you. Go on and enjoy your break." Left alone, Allie walked to the window. The memory she had so long and painstakingly suppressed suddenly surged back with new force. Vanessa Sinclair, the star of the school, the prettiest and most vicious girl in their grade. Allie, then a quiet, slightly overweight girl who loved to draw. Allie, the artist, had been her favorite target. Chubby Allie, Allie the scribbler. These nicknames, invented by Vanessa, had stuck to her like glue. But that was just the beginning. Vanessa was inventive in her cruelty. Once, she stole Allie's portfolio of her best drawings and, during recess, handed them out sheet by sheet to the entire class, suggesting they perfect the masterpieces. The children, afraid of Vanessa, obediently drew mustaches and horns on portraits and ridiculous details onto the landscapes. Allie cried as she gathered the mutilated work from around the classroom, all under Vanessa's laughter. Another time, before a school dance, Vanessa approached her with her friends. "Allie, you're our little creative soul," she chirped in a sickly sweet voice. "We've come up with a new look for you." Before Allie could even react, they poured a can of poster paint mixed with glue over her head. She had to cut off the matted strands of hair and wore an awkward, short haircut for the rest of the year. The day she saw her name on the list of students accepted to art school was the day of her liberation. Allie moved to another city and never saw Vanessa again. Never until today. A heavy sigh escaped her chest. She hadn't realized how much that old wound still ached. After the last class, while gathering her things in the faculty lounge, Allie glanced out the window into the courtyard and froze. A gleaming black SUV was parked by the school gate, and next to it, impatiently tapping her heel, stood a tall, striking blonde in a perfectly tailored cashmere coat. Bryce ran out of the school, and the woman turned to him and said something. Even from a distance, Allie recognized her. Vanessa Sinclair. She had barely changed, only becoming more polished and self-assured. Gathering her courage, Allie left the school, secretly hoping Vanessa wouldn't notice her. But her former classmate's eyes narrowed predatorily, and the familiar sneering smile appeared on her lips. "I look, and I don't believe my eyes!" Vanessa exclaimed loudly with feigned surprise as Allie came abreast of them. "Allie the scribbler? What brings you here? Are you working here? As a teacher?" Allie stopped, pretending not to hear was pointless. "Hello, Vanessa. Yes, I work here. I'm your son's teacher." "No kidding," Vanessa laughed. "It's a small world. I thought you were still holed up somewhere in a little room, painting your pictures. But here you are, apparently mingling with people. So how is it? Spreading wisdom, goodness, and eternal beauty for next to nothing." "It suits me fine," Allie replied coldly. "I see." Vanessa swept her with a dismissive glance, sliding over Allie's simple coat and flats. "Still the same gray mouse. Nothing's changed. Me, though, I didn't fall apart after my husband died. He left me a business, and now I'm just skimming the cream. I live like a queen. A catch, by the way. Men are lining up to date me." Every word she spoke was laced with venom and a sense of superiority. Vanessa wanted to humiliate, to crush, to show who was the winner in life. Allie felt bitterness and pain, but she held herself in check. She had learned a long time ago not to show her hurt. "I'm happy for you. I have to go. Goodbye." Allie turned and walked away, feeling the triumphant stare of her former classmate on her back. She would not give Vanessa the satisfaction of seeing her cry, not for anything. Returning home, she sat in silence for a long time, holding Rex. The dog, sensing her state, rested his head on her lap and whined softly. The encounter with Vanessa had thrown her off balance, but it had also angered her. Enough of being a victim, enough crying and feeling sorry for myself. Her gaze fell on the cursed tile. The vet's words echoed in her head again. Strong irritant, smell, warning. Allie knelt and began to inspect the floor around the area, and in that moment, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Right next to the tile, where the old wooden baseboard didn't quite meet the wall, there was a small gap. Her heart hammered faster. Allie ran to the kitchen, grabbed a long bread knife, and returned. Carefully, so as not to break it, she slid the blade into the gap and moved it sideways. The knife hit something soft but firm. She hooked it with the tip of the knife and gently pulled it out. From behind the baseboard appeared a small, tightly rolled and tied up with a frayed string, a yellowed piece of photo paper. With trembling hands, she untied the string and unrolled the scroll. It was an old black and white photograph. In it, leaning against a tree in a summer garden, stood a young, smiling woman whom Allie could barely recognize as Marcus's Aunt Carolyn Harris. Next to her stood a handsome, dark-haired man in a simple shirt, tenderly embracing her shoulders. In Carolyn's arms, she held a little girl of about 2 or 3, with big bows in her hair. All 3 looked incredibly happy. Allie flipped the photo over. On the back, written in faded calligraphic ink, were the words, "My family, Eli, Maisie, 1978. Allie sat on the floor, unable to move. Family. But Marcus and his mother had always said that Aunt Carol had never married and had no children. She was an old maid who had devoted herself to working in the library. Who were these people, and why was this photograph hidden as if it were a terrible secret? Allie anxiously waited for her husband to return. He came home late, as usual, smelling of expensive perfume. But not his own, a woman's scent. Marcus was in a good mood, which was rare lately. "Hey, Allie, I picked up your favorite wine for dinner. Let's celebrate." "Mark, I found something," Allie interrupted him, unable to wait any longer, and held out the photograph. He took it, and the smile slowly slid off his face. First, he turned so pale that the freckles on his face stood out as bright dots. Then his face became crimson. "Where did you get this?" "From behind the baseboard in the foyer. Mark, who are these people? It says my family. Did Aunt Carol have a family?" Instead of answering, her husband furiously snatched the photo from her hands. "I'm asking you, where did you get this?" Allie recoiled. She had never seen him like this. His face was twisted with fury. "That is none of your business. Don't you dare dig into my family's past." "I don't understand," Allie stammered. "And you don't need to understand anything," he roared, crumpling the priceless picture and stuffing it into his pocket. "Forget you saw it, and that's that." He spun around and marched into the kitchen, slamming the door. Allie remained standing in the middle of the foyer, stunned and frightened. But before her husband could snatch the photo, she had, obeying some inner instinct, managed to take a clear cell phone picture of both the front and the back. The next day, after her husband left for work, Allie resolutely walked over to her neighbor. Mrs. Dolores Jones, a spry but very lively older woman, had lived in this apartment since the building was constructed. She was the only person who might know anything. "Come in, dear, come in," Mrs. Jones bustled, letting Allie into her cozy, slightly cluttered apartment. "What did you want?" "I'm sorry to bother you," Allie began, feeling terribly awkward. "I wanted to ask about Carolyn Harris, the former owner of our apartment." "Sweet Carol," the older woman sighed, and her face grew dark. "May she rest in peace. She was a good woman, just unhappy, very unhappy. Mark told me she was a single woman." "They made her single," the neighbor chuckled bitterly. "She had love, and she had a family." Allie's heart gave a troubled leap. She took out her phone and showed the photo. "Do you happen to know who this is?" Mrs. Jones put on her glasses, took the phone, and peered at the screen for a long time. "Lord, Eli and little Maisie, where did you find this? Carol burned everything connected to them. Almost everything, it seems." After a slight pause, the neighbor told the whole story. As it turned out, Carolyn, the daughter of a prominent professor, fell in love with the simple construction foreman, Elias Flores. He was handsome, honest, and hardworking, but not their type. Carolyn's parents, powerful and snobbish people, were horrified. They forbade her from seeing Elias, but their love was stronger. Carolyn became pregnant and gave birth to Maisie. They lived secretly in a rented apartment, but were incredibly happy. Elias was about to receive the key for a new small apartment. They planned to marry. And then tragedy struck. Mrs. Jones's voice trembled. Elias died. At the construction site. They said it was an accident. A scaffolding fell. Carolyn was left alone with the child. Her parents took advantage of it. They arrived and caused a scandal, saying they wouldn't permit the disgrace, and the illegitimate child was not welcome. They literally took Maisie by force, saying they would give her to a good family where she would have a future. And they announced to everyone that the child had been born, weak, and died. Allie gasped for breath. How is that possible? Anything was possible in those days if you had good connections, the older woman sighed. Carolyn blamed herself for the rest of her life for not having the strength to fight. She gave in. She broke. She tried to find Maisie later, but her parents covered all the tracks. That's how she lived, alone with that pain. In her last years, she was very sick. She had a heart condition. Her family doctor, Dr. Richard Miller, would visit her, a very good, attentive doctor. She seemed to trust him and talked to him a lot. Allie left her neighbor in complete shock. Carolyn's story shook her to her core. Now, Rex's behavior and the secret of the tile took on a new, sinister meaning. Maybe she hid something there, something that would help find her daughter. The thought wouldn't leave her alone. That evening, Allie brought up the subject with her husband again. This time, she was determined. "Mark, I know everything about Elias and Maisie." He paled. "The neighbor blabbed, didn't she? Always sticking her nose where it doesn't belong." "Is it true?" Allie insisted. "Yes, it's true," he snapped. "So what? Those are the deep, dark past." "I think Aunt Carol hid something under that tile in the foyer. Some documents. Maybe the address of the family. We have to open the floor." "Are you crazy? Open the floor? Did you see how expensive that tile is? The renovations here are high-end. I'm not going to tear everything up because of your idiotic fantasies." "These are not fantasies!" Allie cried, and the tears she had held back for so long streamed down her face. "Your aunt suffered her whole life. They took her child, and you're talking about renovations. Do you have any decency?" "Decency?" Marcus sneered, and the sneer was terrifying. "You're not one to talk about decency. You don't know anything. Tell me then, explain why you're so afraid of this." "Because the past should stay in the past. It doesn't need to be dredged up." "I'm going to do it anyway, with or without you." The argument gradually reached its peak. The couple screamed at each other, neither listening nor understanding. At one point, Marcus, driven mad by her stubbornness, grabbed his wife by the shoulders and shook her violently. "I told you, you won't do anything!" There was madness in his eyes, and Allie realized her husband was truly afraid of something. Then, in a fit of desperate and vicious determination, Marcus himself rushed to the utility closet and returned a second later with a power drill in his hands. "You want the truth? Then take it." With those words, he aimed the drill at the center of the cursed tile without hesitation. A deafening whine filled the air. Debris flew, the tile cracked. Then again, Mark ripped it out in chunks, tossing everything aside, revealing an empty space in the cement screed, and in that space lay a small, time-blackened wooden box. They stared, breathing heavily. Allie knelt and took the box out with trembling hands. The lid wasn't locked. She lifted it. Inside were no valuables, no adoption papers. The top layer held a neat stack of letters tied with a ribbon, letters from Elias to Carolyn. Beneath them was a pile of children's drawings. Unskilled, childish hands had drawn a sun, a little house, and flowers. In every corner, the name Maisie was written. Allie's heart twisted. At the very bottom lay an old, worn notebook in an oilcloth cover. She opened it, and what she saw made her blood run cold. These were not personal notes, but rather reports. Dry, professional, with dates, object numbers, and surnames. Reports on illegal construction work from the 1980s. They detailed schemes for embezzlement, forged estimates, and the use of substandard, life-threatening materials at the very construction sites where Elias worked as a foreman. He had documented everything, but most importantly, it mentioned the names of the higher-ups who covered up these crimes. And among those names, Allie saw a surname that made her head spin. The surname of Marcus's grandfather, his mother Ludmilla's father. Everything became clear now. Elias had not died accidentally, and this notebook was his insurance. The young foreman was eliminated to silence him. The accident at the construction site was most likely staged. And Marcus's entire family, his grandfather and his mother, they all knew about it. They didn't just take the child from Carolyn, they covered for her loved one's killer. Allie looked up. Marcus was staring at the notebook without any surprise. A strange, malicious smirk twisted his face. "Well, did you dig up the truth? Are you happy?" Allie remained silent, clutching the box to her chest. She realized she was in the center of a monstrous family secret, built on blood and lies. Mark had known everything from the beginning, and his concern, his protection, was nothing more than an attempt at control, to keep her from getting too close to the truth. Gaining control of herself with difficulty, Allie decided not to escalate the awkward, terrifying situation. She silently got up, carried the box into the bedroom, and hid it in the closet. That evening, Marcus didn't come to her. He made a bed for himself on the sofa in the living room. At night, Allie heard her husband talking to someone quietly on the phone for a long time, going out onto the balcony. Lying alone in the dark, In this vast old apartment full of ghosts of the past, she involuntarily remembered how they met. It was 5 years ago, during the golden autumn. Their mutual friends had invited everyone mushroom hunting. Allie had gotten lost, wandering away from the group in search of white mushrooms. Her phone had no signal. She was beginning to panic when he emerged from behind the trees with a full basket and a compass in his hand. "Lost?" the guy asked with such a disarming smile that she immediately stopped being afraid. "Don't worry. I know this forest like the back of my hand. My name is Mark." "Allie," she exhaled. He led her back to the others, telling funny stories and sharing mushroom-picking secrets the whole way. He had been so charming and reliable, a true knight. How could that bright, smiling young man from her memories have turned into the angry stranger who was now sleeping just beyond the wall? She also remembered something else, her first meeting with his mother. A widow living off a considerable fortune left by her husband, Ludmilla Harris was a cold and commanding woman. Her future mother-in-law had put her through a real test by inviting her to an expensive Chinese restaurant. "Allie, I hope you know how to eat with chopsticks," she had asked with cold politeness while the waiter took their order. "My Mark loves Asian cuisine so much. It's very important for a woman to share her man's passions." Allie, who had used chopsticks only a couple of times in her life, froze. The whole evening, under the watchful eye of her future mother-in-law, she struggled to hold slippery pieces of shrimp and dim sum. Ludmilla watched her like an insect under a microscope, asking tricky questions about her family, education, and plans for life. "I hope you understand that my son needs a suitable match, not just a pretty artist," the mother-in-law had tossed out at the end of dinner. Allie passed the examination with dignity that night, but an unpleasant feeling remained. Even then, the girl felt that not everything was simple in this family, that behind the facade of prosperity lay cold calculation and strict rules. The next day, taking advantage of a gap in her schedule, Allie met with her only close friend, Chloe. Chloe had gone through a messy and unfair divorce 6 months ago, which had made her cynical, but also insightful. Without going into details about the notebook, Allie told her about her husband's coldness, his strange behavior, and the late-night calls. Chloe listened, stirring her coffee with a spoon. "I beg you, what exhaustion at work. I heard that song for a year until I found out his late-night negotiations were with a 25-year-old blonde from the marketing department. Men are as primitive as amoebas. They only cause problems. You want to know the truth?" "I do," Allie said firmly. Chloe reached into her large purse and pulled out a tiny device the size of a small lighter. "This is a professional voice-activated recorder. The memory and battery last for a couple of days. Hide it in his car. The best spot is between the cushions of the back seat. No one ever checks there. I used one like this to expose my ex." Allie looked at the device with doubt. "Chloe, isn't that wrong, spying? What's wrong is when they lie to your face and you believe it," her friend retorted. "Believe me, better a bitter truth than a sweet lie. Listen to what he says when you're not around, and you'll understand everything. Then you'll decide what to do with that truth." Chloe placed the cold metal rectangle in her palm. "Take it, and don't be a sheep being led to the slaughter." That evening, while her husband was in the shower, Allie slipped out onto the street with a pounding heart. The car was parked in the driveway. She unlocked the door with her key, quickly scrambled into the back seat, and just as her friend instructed, tucked the recorder deep into the gap between the backrest and the seat. Returning to the apartment, she felt both shame and a kind of angry satisfaction. She had crossed a line, but there was no turning back. She had to know the whole truth. The next morning, while Allie, broken and sleepless, tried to force down a cup of coffee, a drama unfolded in the principal's office. The door burst open without a knock, and standing in the doorway, exuding the scent of expensive perfume and righteous indignation, was Vanessa Sinclair. "Principal Williams, I demand immediate action," she declared, walking up to the desk and tossing her crocodile skin handbag onto it. "There is an absolutely unqualified educator working in your, begging your pardon, school." Principal Williams calmly adjusted his glasses. Good morning, Vanessa Sinclair. Are you referring to someone specific? Someone specific? Yes. That Dixon woman, Aaliyah Dixon. She humiliated my son in front of the whole class yesterday. Vanessa's voice rang with outrage. Bryce came home completely traumatized. She yelled at him. She threatened him. I won't let this go. I demand her termination. Principal Williams sighed and folded his hands on the table. Ms. Sinclair, I have already spoken with the teacher and other students in the 6th grade. You know, I have a slightly different picture of what happened. What other picture? You believe this gray mouse over me? My son is a sensitive child. He just lost his father, and this harpy is committing psychological abuse. There's no need to exaggerate, the principal countered. Aaliyah Dixon, politely but firmly, asked your son not to insult his classmates and not to disrupt the lesson, which, in my opinion, falls within her direct professional duties. Vanessa let out an unpleasant, sharp laugh. Do you know who I am? I'm on the PTA board, and I can organize an investigation from the Department of Education that will get all of you fired. Fire her peacefully, hire a real teacher, not this incompetent woman with a chip on her shoulder. The principal removed his glasses and looked at her with a tired but firm gaze. Aaliyah Dixon is one of our best educators. The children adore her, and her colleagues respect her. She is a talented artist, a compassionate person who can reach even the most difficult students. I will not fire a valuable employee simply because her professionalism was not to the liking of your spoiled son. This conversation is over. Vanessa turned crimson. She was not used to being rebuffed. You will regret this, the wealthy woman hissed through gritted teeth, grabbed her bag, and turning on her high heels, stormed out of the office, slamming the door so hard that the glass in the bookcase rattled. Principal Williams shook his head and dialed an internal number. Aaliyah Dixon, please come see me for a minute. When Allie walked in, he smiled warmly. Vanessa Sinclair was just here demanding your blood. So, if she or her son try to cause any trouble, report it to me immediately and just keep working. We won't let them harm you. The principal's words warmed her a little, but the overall picture of her life was no less grim. For 2 days, she lived in a fog, barely speaking to her husband. He pretended that nothing had happened, that the terrible fight and his outburst of rage hadn't occurred. Mark tried to be caring again. He brought her pastries and suggested watching a movie, but Allie saw the falseness in every gesture, every word, and she simply waited for the right moment to retrieve the recorder. It happened on Saturday morning when Mark was getting ready for an urgent meeting with suppliers. She slipped out of the house. Her heart was beating so fast it hammered in her ears. Her hands were shaking as Allie fumbled for the device in the gap of the back seat. She found it. Hiding it in her pocket, she returned to the apartment and locked all the doors behind her. Allie settled in the kitchen, put on her headphones, and pressed play. First came some rustling, the noise of the road, and music. Then her husband's voice spoke. Allie froze. Yes, I'm telling you, Grant, calm down. Everything's under control. What control, Mark? The second, nervous voice obviously belonged to his partner. We're already being investigated. The IRS called. And that Northwood development project? Cracks are already showing in the facade. The residents are complaining. If the commission comes, we're finished. The materials there are totally fake. You know that. Keep your voice down, Mark hissed at him. I'll fix everything. I'll smooth things over with the inspectors, and we'll tell the residents it's just the building settling. Normal process. The main thing is the paperwork is in order, and our shell company, Build Sure, is clean as a whistle. All the kickbacks went through it, and the paper trail is gone. Allie listened, the icy horror gripping her. This was far worse than she could have imagined. What about the apartment? Grant asked. Did you find it? Not yet, Mark replied in annoyance. My wife turned into a detective. The dog sensed something, too. It kept barking. I had to rip out the tile myself to calm her down. I found some old lady junk, photos, letters, but the main thing isn't there. The old woman wouldn't crack before she died about where she hid it exactly. She only said the safest place. I've already tapped all the walls and checked all the floors. So maybe it's not there, or maybe she destroyed it. She couldn't have, Marcus roared. That notebook is the only copy of my grandfather's archive. He would have guarded it like the apple of his eye. And she would have, too. It's their family relic. It has to be here somewhere. This apartment isn't just an inheritance for me. It's the perfect hideout and staging ground. No one is going to look for dirt on a major businessman in an old librarian's apartment. The recording continued. They discussed various schemes, sums of money, and names. Allie understood everything. Her husband wasn't just a fraudster. He was the continuation of his grandfather's legacy, only on a much larger, more monstrous scale. He was building homes that could collapse at any moment, using materials dangerous to people's health. And the apartment they lived in was simply a warehouse for stolen money and blackmail material. Poor Rex. He wasn't barking at ghosts at all, but at the smell of old mold and construction chemicals that Marcus brought home on his clothes from the sites. When she turned off the recorder, a ringing silence filled her ears. Allie sat staring blankly. The man she loved, the man she had married, was a monster. Marcus returned a couple of hours later. Seeing her frozen, pale face, he seemed to understand everything. "Did something happen?" her husband asked with feigned tenderness, but a cold, assessing glint was already lit in his eyes. "I know everything," Allie said softly. "About Build, Shore, Northwood, and your grandfather's notebook." He didn't deny it. The smile slowly left his face, replaced by an icy mask. "So, you found out after all. And how did you do it? Eavesdropping? Rummaging through my things?" "That doesn't matter anymore. You're a criminal, and you're endangering people's lives." He moved close to her, slowly, like a predator circling its prey. "And you've become very brave, I see. Do you think if you run to the police, anyone will believe you?" "They will," Allie said firmly. "I have evidence." Her husband laughed. "Oh yeah? What kind? An old notebook from a crazy old lady? Have you forgotten who I am? And who are you? A woman with an unstable psyche who recently experienced a devastating tragedy." He leaned in even closer, and his voice sent shivers down her spine. "No one will believe a hysteric who is slandering her loving, caring husband. I'll hire the best lawyers and psychiatrists. They'll have you certified as insane very quickly." Marcus grabbed her arm. His fingers dug into her skin like a steel vise. "And if you insist on pushing this, remember what I told you about Elias, the foreman Aunt Carol was in love with? There was an accident with him at the construction site. A slab fell. Well, accidents sometimes repeat themselves." It was a direct, undisguised threat. Allie looked into his eyes and saw madness. "Let me go," she whispered. "I'll take what belongs to my family." He released her arm, walked into the bedroom, pulled the box with the notebook and letters from the hiding place. In front of Allie, he took out the notebook and threw everything else on the floor. "You can keep this trash." Then he walked to the large metal safe they had installed in the closet wall. He typed in the code, threw the notebook inside, and slammed the door shut. "Now everything is where it should be. If you try to do anything stupid, you only have yourself to blame." Her husband left, and she was left standing in the middle of the room in utter terror. Allie was living in the same apartment with a criminal, with a killer, who was holding her hostage. Her first call was to Chloe. She grabbed her phone, locked herself in the bathroom, and turning on the water to muffle the sound, whispered everything. "Oh my God, that's terrifying!" Her friend's voice was shaken. "Okay, listen to me carefully. No sudden moves. Act normal. Don't let on that you're afraid or planning anything. He must not suspect a thing." "Chloe, I'm scared. He threatened me." "I know, honey, but you can't panic now. We need to gather evidence, any evidence. Record his conversations on your phone if you can. Photograph any documents you find. We need more than just an old notebook. We need his modern operations. And as soon as we have enough, we'll strike. But for now, keep a low profile. Understand?" "Understood," Allie breathed. Chloe's plan seemed to be the only thing keeping her from simply running away. Trying to distract herself and clear her mind, Allie took Rex and went to the park. The air was cool and fresh. The sun filtered through the yellowing leaves. The central path was noisy and crowded. Volunteers from a local shelter were holding a charitable adoption event for homeless animals. Puppies and kittens sat in cages, and adult dogs wearing vests that read "Looking for a Home" walked on leashes. Allie was surprised to see a familiar face among the volunteers. It was the vet. Julian looked completely different than he did in the clinic. In a simple t-shirt and jeans, he was laughing, playing with a floppy-eared puppy. Allie couldn't help but admire him. An aura of calm and kindness radiated from him. A group of children was busy near him. Allie looked closer and realized they were residents of a local children's home. The kids were often brought to this park. Among them, she noticed two standing apart. A girl of about 7 with huge, serious eyes and 2 thin braids, and a boy a little older, silent and sullen, who didn't leave her side. The little girl was squatting and absorbed in drawing on the asphalt with colored chalk. Allie approached to see better. The girl was drawing a house, old, with columns at the entrance and large windows, very similar to the one where Allie lived. And above the roof of the house, she was drawing the figure of an angel with large wings. That angel looked exactly like the small porcelain figurine that stood on the mantelpiece in Aunt Carolyn's living room. Allie remembered it, and it had survived the move. It was a staggering coincidence. "That's beautiful," Allie said, sitting down next to her. "You're a real artist. What's your name?" The little girl looked up at her with serious eyes. "Leah, and this is my brother Terrell." The boy frowned even more. "That's a very beautiful house," Allie said softly. "Did you make it up?" "No," the girl shook her head. "I dream about it. And the little angel, too. He says he watches over our home." Just then, the supervisor, a plump woman with a kind face, approached them. "Leah, Terrell, don't bother the lady. Come on, it's almost time for tea." "I apologize," Allie said, standing up and addressing the supervisor. "I just like the drawing. I'm an art teacher myself." "Yes, little Leah really is talented," the woman said proudly. "She takes after her grandma, probably. She used to draw beautifully, too." "Do you happen to know what their grandmother's name was?" Allie asked, her heart pounding with a troubled premonition. "Of course I do. Mariah Flores. She was a good woman, but her life was difficult. She died a few years ago and never managed to raise the children properly. And her daughter, Leah and Terrell's mother, really went downhill. She had to lose custody. So they were left as orphans." Mariah Flores. Maisie, the daughter of Carolyn and Elias. Allie's knees gave out. What if these were them? The direct descendants, Carolyn Harris's great-grandchildren. "What about the children? Are they okay?" Allie forced out the words. The supervisor sighed sadly. "Terrell has shut down since his mother disappeared. He's constantly sad. And little Leah has a congenital heart defect. She needs a very expensive surgery. We're on the waiting list for a grant, but who knows when it will come through. And time is passing." Allie looked at these 2 small lost children and felt an incredible, almost mystical connection to them. She had found Carolyn Harris's family, and now she was simply obliged to help them, no matter what the cost. The next day, Allie found the address of the clinic to which Carolyn Harris had been registered and made an appointment with her family doctor. Dr. Richard Miller was an older, intelligent man with very discerning eyes. "You're a relative of Carolyn Harris, if I'm not mistaken," he asked the moment Allie walked into the office. "Marcus Dixon's wife. I saw the wedding photos in the paper." "Yes, that's right," Allie nodded. "Dr. Miller, I've come to you with a very personal and delicate question concerning your former patient." Carefully choosing her words, she told him about the discovered photograph and the story of the daughter, Mariah. The doctor listened attentively, never interrupting. "I knew it," he said when she finished. "I knew someone would show up. Carolyn was a very lonely but very wise woman. In her last months, she spoke with me often, as if she sensed her departure and was afraid the secret would die with her." The doctor stood up, walked to a filing cabinet, opened one of the drawers with a key, and pulled out a thick yellow envelope. "She left this with me. She said, 'Dr. Miller, if after my death anyone shows up looking for my family, anyone with a good heart, Give this to them. I trust you. And I believe that someone is you, Aaliyah." The doctor handed her the envelope. Written on it in neat handwriting were the words, "For my daughter Mariah, or her descendants, if they are found." With trembling hands, Allie broke the seal. Inside was an official document folded into quarters. It was a notarized will. It stated in black and white that Carolyn Harris left her entire estate, the downtown apartment, and all the funds in her bank account, to her only daughter, Mariah Flores, or her direct heirs in the event of her daughter's death. Allie gasped. So that's it. Marcus inherited unlawfully. Gathering her courage, she decided to give her husband one last chance. Perhaps seeing the official document would awaken a shred of conscience in him. That evening, when he returned, Allie silently placed the will on the table in front of him. Her husband quickly scanned the lines, but his face remained unchanged. "And what is this? Where did you dig up this fake document?" "Aunt Carolyn's doctor gave it to me. This is the real will. The apartment, the money. It all belongs to her great-grandchildren, Leah and Terrell." "Leah and Terrell?" her husband sneered. "Did you find some poor kids and conspire with them to take everything from me? Isn't that a bit much?" "They're not poor kids. They're your relatives. Those nobodies are nothing to me. Did you actually think I didn't know about this little paper? I drew up another will a long time ago, leaving everything to me, and it's already been executed. You're too late." Allie's vision blurred. "How could you?" "Easily." Her husband walked up to her, and his voice took on mocking notes. "And you, my naive one, thought I married you just for love? No, you're just convenient, quiet, modest, a gray mouse." At that moment, the front door burst open with a crash, and a pale, disheveled Grant rushed into the apartment. "Mark, we're finished," he yelled from the doorway. "They came for me. They're digging in to build Shore. I need the notebook, now. We have to destroy it." The dog barked menacingly at the guest. "Calm down, you maniac," Marcus roared. "No one will find anything. The notebook's in the safe." "Give it to me!" Grant was on the verge of a breakdown. "This is because of your greed. I warned you. If they take me, I'm dragging you with me. I'll tell them everything about your grandfather, about you, and I'll tell your wife how you—" For Allie, this was the last straw. While the partners screamed at each other, she, acting on instinct, grabbed Rex's collar, darted to the door, flew out onto the landing, and rushed down the stairs without looking back. Aaliyah walked down the evening street, not feeling the cold. Tears blurred her eyes. Everything in her chest was burning. She was terrified, humiliated, crushed. Allie pulled out her phone. Who should she call? Chloe? The police? But what would she tell them? Her head was a complete mess. Then her fingers dialed the vet's number on their own. Julian answered almost immediately. "Hello, this is Aaliyah Dixon." Her voice was breaking. She was choking on her sobs. "Allie? What happened? Where are you?" Instant alarm sounded in the man's tone. "I don't know. I'm on the street. My husband threatened me. I ran away." "Okay, calm down. Can you hear me? Calm down. Go to my clinic. Do you remember where it is? I'll be waiting right now." The short, clear commands had a sobering effect. She walked, leading the confused Rex, and 10 minutes later, she saw the saving light of the veterinary clinic sign. Julian was waiting on the doorstep. He let them in and immediately locked the door. At that moment, once she was safe, she broke down. Her body shook with violent tremors. Her heart was racing. She couldn't catch her breath. Allie started hyperventilating. Everything swam before her eyes. "A panic attack," Julian exclaimed. He acted quickly and professionally. "Look at me. Breathe with me. Inhale and a slow exhale. Again. Inhale. Exhale." He took Allie's cold hands in his and spoke to her in a quiet, soothing voice, forcing her to focus on his words. Then he brought her a glass of water, sat her in a chair, and covered her with a blanket. Gradually, her frantic heartbeat slowed. Her breathing evened out. "Thank you," Allie whispered when she could speak. "It's okay. You're safe," Julian said, sitting opposite her. "Tell me everything, but take your time." At that moment, she seemed to burst. She told him about the dog, the tile, the notebook, and the will. Julian listened silently, his gaze mixing sympathy with anger. When she finished, the vet said, "You're staying here tonight. There's a restroom. I won't let you leave alone. Tomorrow we'll take action." That night, Allie slept on the small sofa in his office. Rex lay at her feet. Julian checked on her several times, and seeing his quiet, unobtrusive care, feeling his protection, Allie experienced peace for the first time in many months. And with surprise, she also realized that this kind, strong, calm man stirred feelings in her much deeper than mere gratitude. The next day, they met with Chloe in a small cafe again. A plan quickly formed. "The notebook's in the safe," Chloe said. "But you mentioned he referred to his grandfather's archive, and your Mark, from the sound of it, is just as self-absorbed and greedy as his ancestor. He wouldn't have failed to digitize everything for quick access. There must be a flash drive, a hard drive, or cloud storage somewhere with copies of the modern documents." "And where do I look for that?" Allie didn't understand. "Most likely in the apartment," Julian interjected. "Can you get back in unnoticed?" "Yes. Mark probably thinks I'm having a hysterical breakdown at Chloe's, and he'll be at work until evening." "Then go," her friend said. "But not alone. Take Rex. Dogs sense things that are hidden. He led you to the first secret spot. Maybe he'll lead you to the second." The plan seemed risky, of course, but there was no other. Allie, summoning all her courage, drove home. The apartment greeted her with echoing silence. She walked in and quietly commanded, "Rex, search." The dog immediately began sniffing everything in a businesslike manner. Allie followed. The dog walked past the safe, past Marcus's desk, and confidently nudged his nose at the large bookcase in his study. The pet whined and started scratching at one of the shelves stacked with old, uniformly bound volumes. Allie started pulling out the books one by one. In one of them, a thick construction handbook, she found what she was looking for. A cavity had been neatly cut into the spine of the book, and in it lay a black flash drive. Grabbing it, Allie darted out of the apartment like a bullet. The flash drive contained everything: forged tenders, fictitious completion certificates, scans of invoices to shell companies, and most importantly, all of Marcus's correspondence with Grant and other accomplices, where they discussed their schemes in detail. Chloe acted lightning fast. Through her connections, she arranged a meeting with Mr. Thomas Peterson, the director of a large construction company whom Marcus and Grant, according to the documents, had defrauded in a major tender, setting him up and nearly bankrupting him. Seeing the evidence, the businessmen flew into a rage. Together, they went to the district attorney's office. The arrests were high profile. Marcus and Grant were taken directly from their office. When the investigator, based on the testimony and evidence, opened the safe in the apartment, they found not only the notebook, but also an unregistered firearm. The case began to acquire new details. Vanessa Sinclair's name also surfaced. It was soon discovered that Vanessa, who had a law degree, had helped the fraudsters with forging documents. But when they dug deeper, it turned out she already had experience with falsification. Vanessa had forged the will of her late husband, who, upon learning of her numerous infidelities, had left his entire fortune to his mother. Moreover, the investigation found evidence that the car crash in which he died was not accidental. Vanessa slipped up on minor details, and she was facing jail time not for fraud, but for organizing a murder. The trial took place several months later. The will found by Allie was recognized as the only valid one. All of Carolyn Harris's assets and savings were transferred to her only descendants, Leah and Terrell. Allie, meanwhile, filed the documents for their legal guardianship. And the first thing she did after gaining access to the account was pay for Leah's surgery at the best clinic in the city. Fortunately, it was a success. When the little girl returned home to their now shared, bright, clean apartment, Terrell walked up to his sister, timidly touched her hand, and said quietly but clearly, "I missed you so much." Allie and Julian, standing nearby, couldn't hold back their tears. One evening, after the children were asleep, Julian looked directly into her eyes. "Allie," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "From the very first day you came to my clinic with Rex, I couldn't stop thinking about you. I was captivated by your strength, your kindness, and how fiercely you fought for those you love. First for Rex, then for these kids, and for justice. I love you, and I want us to become a real family. You, me, Leah, Terrell, and, of course, Rex." Allie looked into his kind, loving eyes and smiled through tears of happiness. "I love you too," she whispered. He hugged her, and it was an embrace that held no control or deceit, only warmth, tenderness, and the promise of a new, happy destiny. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.